Hello and welcome back to Arsenal Domination, where it's the day after Arsenal's win against Leicester. As I said yesterday, the points were important, but it's important not to get carried away. Um, while no Premier League games are, you know, always easy, this is one you have to be winning, and Arsenal indeed did do that. And I think that is it. The performance wasn't great. Um, yeah, I mean, there's nothing more to really say, is there, on that? Really, I don't think this performance was a surprise necessarily, but specifically the first half. Arsenal have been rusty after not playing for a while and having to get used to playing with an entirely new front three. But yeah, I think we sort of covered the Leicester game yesterday in that brief little recap I did after the game yesterday, which you can find on my channel. But what I did think is it gave us a little bit more information around how Arsenal will fix the front three issues that we're going to have to get through for the next 4 to 6 weeks. We all know there's no Jesus, no Havertz now for the rest of the season, and no Martinelli and Saka for at least the next 4 weeks, leaving Arsenal down to sort of three options in the forward line: Ranieri, Trossard, and Sterling. And that's indeed what started yesterday. I said beforehand, that's what I expected to see start. I didn't expect to see a radical shift in formation, because essentially you're making a huge change to the way Arsenal play at this stage of the season. And it's a way of playing that has served us quite well for the last few years. What I did think would happen would be that we'd need to make interchanges in the game, either in terms of formation or playing people out of position. Now, the one I did sort of expect to see was maybe Kieran Tierney coming on further forward, possibly Zinchenko. I didn't necessarily expect it to Mikel Merino. Now, I know that some people did sort of say that and call for that, and, it was widely laughed at, and, scorn was poured on it, and understandably so. A club like Arsenal shouldn't be having to play Mikel Merino as a centre forward. But we saw yesterday how effective it was. And actually, I do think he offered something a little bit different. It's a very small sample size, important not to get carried away. But something I didn't consider beforehand was, obviously, in addition to Moreno, was the lack of height that you do have when you have that Ranieri, Trossard, Sterling front three. And Arsenal, probably at their best, do play with that physical presence. That's the word I'm looking for, in the number 9 role. Kai Havertz might not be a natural striker, but he offers good link-up play. He comes deep. He connects the play. He offers a real physical presence in the box, giving Arsenal the option to sort of play into feet or cross the ball. Obviously, we know his major issue is that he's not a natural finisher, and I think that applies to Mikel Merino. But when you compare the two profiles, I'm not sure Merino can press to quite the extent that Havertz can. But otherwise, their profiles are fairly similar. And actually, watching that game yesterday and thinking about it in the last sort of 24 hours, or just under 24 hours, it kind of makes you think, is this the path to least resistance in many ways for Arsenal? And therefore, is he the right option because he minimises the amount of changes you've got to make? I think we'll see this again. I think we'll see it against West Ham, and I think that would be sensible, given West Ham are quite physical, and given Raheem Sterling's issues, for want of a better one. I want to touch on Raheem in a second or two in a little bit more detail, but I think that does give us another option. It's not obviously what you want to see, and it is from my view, a sort of last resort option. But I think that's where Arsenal are down to, for reasons we've discussed many times before. And I think Arsenal and Mikel Arteta do deserve some praise for yesterday, for finding a different way to win. And we're going to have to see that again, I think, in the next 4 or 5 weeks. It's not going to be pretty. It's just going to be about trying to get the wins, and ultimately that's all that will really matter. And it will require a variation on those things, as I discussed before. I think we saw in-game formation change yesterday. Arsenal almost playing 4-4-2 at one point. I can see the five at the back, with wing-backs being used. I can see different options being used, and I think that's going to have to be what Arsenal are going to have to do. And it's almost going to have to be throw enough mud at the wall and sort of hope it sticks approach, which is, of course, not where you want, but that's reality sometimes. And I don't think that's where Arsenal are going to have to be, because that's where the injuries coupled with the inaction in January have left them. But yeah, we'll see what happens. But I think that was quite interesting. I think, obviously, against West Ham, as I say, Moreno needs to start up front. Ranieri needs to continue on the right. I thought he was excellent yesterday. And I think the emergence of him and Mild Lewis Skelly this season have been a real positive in Arsenal's season, That's two legitimate first team players. Not just making up the squad numbers. Which is kind of how I sort of saw them sort of getting a few minutes here and there. The injuries have afforded them the opportunity to get far more game time this season than I think anyone thought, and that's a real positive and will stand Arsenal in good stead going forward. But he was excellent. He needs to start on the ride, and the good news is with this bigger breaks between games, that actually might help sort of get the best out of him. Always feel that Trossard is best on the left. I had him as my number 9 simply because I thought he was the best available option, but I've always felt Trossard's best position was on the left, and we saw that when he moved back out there. He was much more effective yesterday, and that leaves Raheem Sterling as the odd man out. He will drop out, but I mean, he looks a player just shorn of confidence. He's obviously not the player he was at City. I never expected him to be when he came in. I expect him to be the Reece Nelson replacement, to be honest with you. That sort of seventh man. As it turns out, it was a sixth man, although Wanier's inversion maybe have moved him to a seventh man. And I think Raheem Sterling's fine for that. But he does really lack confidence. He's out of sorts. And almost liken it to a social experiment, where you get two sort of groups of people and you give one a really simple task and you give the other an impossible task, but you don't tell the other. And then the last task you give them is exactly the same. And you watch the ones that have failed to complete the impossible task without realising it's impossible struggle to complete the very possible final task, where you find that the ones that have done the easy task and then do the sort of more difficult but still achievable task at the end do it far more quickly. And that's almost where Raheem Sterling's at, where he's forgetting the things he can do because he's so focused on not being able to do things. And probably for that sake, Arsenal can't carry him at this moment, and that's why he needs to drop out. But I wonder whether he's the man that comes on as the number 9 if things aren't quite working or if someone needs a rest, and he plays through the middle, where because he's holding the ball up and taking too long over thinking about things, whether actually he provides that link-up play from the middle to go wide and then hopefully bombs into the middle and has to just hit it first time. Whether that's the key to unlocking his confidence or not, I don't know. Obviously it's a transfer that's not worked out, but it's something that Mikel Arteta will need to think about. But there we go. Arsenal, will play West Ham, hoping to make it 16 unbeaten in the league, which is quite something given we've moved out Saka for 9 of those. It'll be 10 next weekend. Given the issues we clearly had, is quite a feat. It doesn't look like it's going to be enough, but but there we go. We will see. I'll do a video on West Ham in the week, but they were my reflections this morning, sort of on the Mikel Merino. I think he is the path to least resistance. I think he's the one that, as I say, provides means Arsenal don't have to change their way of playing too much. But it's going to require a combination of things to get through, and it's going to require a bit of luck that Arsenal haven't had this season if they're going to win the title this season, or even win the majority of these games in the next 4 or 5 weeks. We'll see, but for now, that looks like, I think, Arsenal's best option for West Ham. And I think it's really good news for Mikel Merino, and it will have done him the world of good to get those goals, as I said yesterday. That's it for me, guys. I'll speak to you all soon. Please like and subscribe, because I should say that and never do. And I'll speak to you all soon. Thanks. Bye.